Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are setting the stage to unpack a really fascinating ancient scriptural riddle, one that actually holds the key to understanding human potential and honestly, how everything in our universe changes and evolves. We're going to be looking at a brilliant philosophical framework from an ancient text, specifically a section of the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra. And the best part? We are going to explore this entirely through the lens of a surprisingly everyday agricultural phenomenon. I promise you, by the end of this, you are going to look at your breakfast in a completely different light. Let's get right into it. Okay, I want you to think about this question for a second. Is curd originally inside milk? Just pause for a beat and really ponder that. When you pour a glass of plain milk, is the solid, thick curd already in there just hiding, waiting to come out? Or is it something entirely new? Now, it sounds like a simple, maybe even a trivial question, right? But the way you answer this actually reveals a whole lot about how you view cause, effect, and reality itself. So, part 1, the milk and curd riddle. Let's see exactly how the sutra sets up this ancient puzzle. Moving right along to part 2, the trap of attachment and falsehood, because naturally our minds want to jump to a quick conclusion here. According to the sutra, the Buddha presents this riddle to his followers specifically to break them out of their conventional ways of thinking. He points out that when faced with this, the human mind almost immediately falls into one of two extreme binary traps. We desperately want a simple yes or no answer. Well, let's dive into this because this is where the argument gets incredibly sharp. If you choose side A and say, yes, absolutely, the curd is inherently already in the milk, the sutra calls this the trap of attachment. And the logical takedown is super simple. If the curd is already perfectly there, why don't we see it right now? Why doesn't it just pour out of the cow as curd? But on the flip side, if you choose side B and say, no way, curd is entirely absent from milk, the text calls this the trap of falsehood or delusion. Why? Because if curd is completely unrelated to milk, why can't we just make curd out of plain water? Why do we specifically need milk to get the curd? You see, both of these extreme answers totally fail to explain reality. What's really interesting here is how the text provides precise physical evidence to prove that milk and curd absolutely cannot be the exact same entity. Notice how they contrast. Obviously, milk is liquid and white, while curd is solid and thick, but it actually goes way deeper into ancient medical theory. The text notes that consuming milk can create what they called a cold illness and was used to treat a hot illness. But curd does the exact opposite. It creates a hot illness and treats a cold illness. So clearly their properties and their functions are fundamentally different. They are not the same thing, which completely shatters that idea that curd is just hiding fully formed inside the milk. Which brings us to part 3, uncovering middle way wisdom. Let's talk about how to navigate past this binary thinking. So if the curd isn't already there, but it also isn't completely absent, what on earth is the answer? Well, the sutra defines the middle way as the state of neither fully existing nor entirely non-existing. It relies entirely on causes and conditions. Basically, the text is teaching us that potential exists, for sure, but the final form does not yet exist without undergoing a specific, rigorous process. It completely breaks that binary of static existence. And this brilliantly illustrates what causal transformation really means. Why can we say the curd exists in the milk? Because undeniably, curd is born from milk. The milk is its absolutely necessary cause. But why must we also say it does not exist? Because as we just saw with the hot and cold properties, their appearances and functions are entirely different right now. This dynamic process of causal transformation, this movement from cause to effect, is the very essence of middle way wisdom. It shows us that reality is an ongoing, fluid chain of causes and effects, not just a bunch of static objects. Now let's connect this everyday agricultural riddle directly to human potential. The sutra states, the wise should say the Buddha nature of sentient beings neither exists nor does not exist. You see, the text uses this milk and curd metaphor to explain Buddha nature, which is our ultimate spiritual potential for enlightenment. Just like the curd and the milk, your ultimate potential doesn't exist yet in a finalized form, but it's not entirely absent either. The raw material is absolutely there. Part 4, the crucial conditions for transformation. So what actually sparks the change? Right. So how does this transformation actually happen? How do we bridge that gap between mere potential and actual reality? The missing ingredient, according to the text, is what it calls skillful means, or the combination of external causes and conditions. The sutra heavily emphasizes that without these external forces, things like specific temperatures, time, or fermentation processes, milk is just going to remain milk forever. It can never magically become curd entirely on its own without encountering the right conditions. The sutra offers another supporting analogy here to really cement this concept. contrasting a seed with the earth, water, and time. The seed is the primary cause, just like the milk. But think about it. If you leave a seed sitting on a dry table, it will never become a fruit. Never. It desperately requires those secondary conditions of soil, moisture, and time to transform into its final result. The cause is internal, but the catalyst has to be external. And this builds into a truly incredible sequence. The sutra actually maps out a continuous chain of transformation based on these conditions. It starts with milk, which with the right conditions becomes curd. Further processing turns that into raw butter, then clarified butter, and finally ghee, which is considered the most refined state. The text uses this sequential transformation of dairy to visually map out how continuous exposure to the right conditions leads to ultimate spiritual refinement. It's an ongoing journey of causal transformation. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Meeting Your Buddha Nature. Let's bring this all back to you. Because look, the text isn't just trying to teach us ancient dairy farming, right? It's mapping this transformative process directly onto our modern lives and our personal spiritual journeys. So the crucial takeaway is this. According to the text, sentient beings, that means us, with all of our flaws and our everyday struggles, we are the milk. We are the raw cause. And Buddha nature, that ultimate enlightened state, is the curd. That is our potential. The sutra is literally telling us that our current, unrefined, messy state is actually the exact necessary raw material for our ultimate awakening. You cannot get curd without milk, and you cannot reach enlightenment without starting exactly where you are, as a flawed human being. To really drive this home, the text offers this incredibly striking metaphor. It says the Buddha nature of sentient beings is like blood mixed in milk. Now, the sutra explains that the blood represents our ignorance and our worldly afflictions, while the milk represents the good parts of our existence. I love this because it shows that our highest potential isn't floating around in some distant, perfect, untouchable realm. It is currently mixed right into our messy, daily, imperfect lives. And the text offers one final brilliant analogy: salt. Just as salt obviously possesses the nature of saltiness, it still needs to interact with other unsalty ingredients to actually make a dish taste salty. In the exact same way, the sutra argues that engaging with positive external conditions, whether that's learning, practicing, or just engaging compassionately with the world, that is the crucial catalyst that activates our internal dormant goodness. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to take away from our time together today. If you are the milk and your greatest potential requires external conditions to transform through that middle way wisdom, what conditions are you cultivating today to awaken the curd of your own Buddha nature? How are you actively shaping your environment and your actions to process your raw potential into something greater? Think about that as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this profound text and keep cultivating those positive conditions.